Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Sara Lubratt and today's video is going to be a writing experiment. Experiment is being used a little bit loosely here, but as I was going through draft 6 of DE, I was starting to have the realizations that somebody else is going to read my book at some point in time. Yes, I've already had beta readers and I've had some people read the first couple chapters of my book, but hopefully relatively soonish, other people will be reading my book as well, whether that's more friends and family or whether that's like literary agents and publishers. So I started doing some research into what literary agents look for in the querying process, including query letters and sample pages. What I learned about the querying process is that agents will often ask for your query letter, which is essentially a one-page pitch of both your book and yourself as an author, and often some sample pages. These sample pages can be the first chapter, the first 5 pages, the first 20 pages, the first 50 pages, and is basically just to give the agent a taste of what your book is like to see if they want to request a full manuscript. When going into this process, I was not expecting it to be as hard as it was, primarily because a lot of my characters and places did not have names, and I am literally on draft 6 and these people and places still didn't have names, and so people needed to get named. Doing this experiment was a great way to force myself to do that. It also took me way longer than I was expecting, but we're gonna get into that. So if you're going to enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you are not already for future publishing updates, you know, way down the road when I am actually querying. And now without further ado, let's get into this writing experiment of working on my sample pages and my query letter. As a part of my push to getting draft 6 of Project DE, my high fantasy project, told from 3 points of view with magic and dragons and all other kinds of fun fantasy things, in my push to completing this draft, I also wanted to look at what an agent would be seeing when I send somebody my sample pages and my query letter. Apparently, sample pages vary agent to agent, but what I'm going to be looking at in this video is my first 50 pages. I read that sample pages can be 5, 20, 50 pages. It really just depends on the person that you're trying to submit to. But I'm going to be looking at the first 50 pages and my query letter because I did draft a query letter for Project DE a while ago. So what I'm going to start with is just sitting down and rereading my first 50 pages, my first double-spaced 50 pages, so it's not even like it's that many words, and kind of trying to take note of whether or not those first 50 pages encapsulate what I am trying to accomplish with this story. So with that, I'm just going to start reading my 50 pages. Currently 7 pages in. I did tell myself originally when I was starting that I did not want to make any edits during this first read through, and that has very much not been the case. There are some things that I'm just highlighting in yellow that I will come back to and change, but for the most part I am just letting myself make tiny edits. And I've noticed some phrasing issues that I don't like, where I repeat one word too much within a certain like paragraph or something, or I had said that a character was going to do something else and the next time we hear a mention of them, they were doing a completely different thing. And so I highlighted that in yellow because I'm like, that cannot fly. Like, that's totally not okay. And this is why we proofread. This is the whole point of doing multiple revisions and everything. But I'm finding myself not liking how this book looks or reads when double spaced. I just personally have something against anything double spaced. I think it reminds me too much of like high school essays where I'm like, this is just like the least interesting way I could possibly be looking at this. But I know that this is how somebody else would be viewing this, which is also something that I'm having to get over. Having to get over is kind of a strange way to put it because it's basically helping me reframe how I'm viewing this, because I'm viewing this as somebody else will hopefully potentially read this at some point. And so getting to look at it from that lens of somebody is going to read this that's not me definitely applies a little bit more pressure, but in like a very good way. And I also realized that these 50 pages, currently it is 54 pages, that takes me to the end of a chapter. I'm just gonna kind of edit and then chop it off at 50 when I'm done, just to see what that's like. But these first 54 pages, my entire book, double space, is 491 pages. So this thing is like almost a 1/10 of my book. I guess this is slightly over 1/10 of my book. So with all that being said, I'm going to sit down and do another reading sprint and try to just kind of keep moving through this.
up looking over the first half of this last night. I am on page 27 this morning, and I've so far made 221 revisions. So this round of edits is not for the faint of heart. I am making a lot more changes in the first round alone that I had been expecting to. But again, it's very interesting to try and read this from at least imagining how another person would read it. And so now this morning I'm sitting back down to start my day off with some editing, and we're just going to keep working on this and pushing through the first reread of the 50 pages. I'm assuming I'm going to want to go through this more than once because again, I kind of want to figure out where the 50 pages ends, and then I want to edit it better within that. Made it through the first read through of my first 50 pages, and for what I was not immediately changing, which I did make a lot of changes, now up to 342 revisions, but on top of that I was also highlighting in yellow anything that I wanted to go back and either look at again for phrasing purposes or because I needed to fact check something within that yellow highlighted portion, and quite frankly there are a lot of those. And then I made it to the end of the 50 pages, and the chapter that the 50 pages lands in has 3 more pages beyond where the 50 pages ends, and that last chapter is kind of a little bit of a pacing shift, so I either need to rewrite that chapter or cut down a lot of what is in that chapter so that the way that the chapter ends can be within the 50 pages, or I need to look ahead, which I actually just did, to the next couple of chapters that come after that one in draft 6 to see if any of those chapters could replace this chapter, to make sure that the tone stays the same, make sure that the pacing stays similarly, and make sure that the pacing stays similar to what it was. And as I was looking at the next couple of chapters that happen in the book, I was getting kind of discouraged because I wasn't sure with the timeline if any of them could actually move up to fit that slot as well. But there's a potential that this character's chapter could actually be moved up. I might need to rephrase a couple of things in the 2 chapters that it would replace or like shift down, but that's a strong potential and I might play around with this. And then I made a new document that I'm calling First 50 Pages version 2, where I swapped out that chapter for the chapter a couple chapters later. I hope all of that's making sense, but I just switched that chapter back up to be the last chapter in the first 50 pages. And that chapter ends pretty perfectly at the 50 pages, so I would feel comfortable wrapping up this document at that point. However, now I actually have to go through and read it and make sure that it reads well going from the chapter previously into this now newly placed chapter. I ended up rereading from that second to last chapter to this new last chapter, and I think it rounds out these first 50 pages much more nicely than the original version did, and so I am going to be sure to also make this change into draft 6. I think it's very interesting to look at these first 50 pages, my sample pages and everything, from the lens of someone else reading this book, because I really do think it's helping, because if I had just been reading through this like I have been for draft 6, the chapter order and stuff doesn't matter so much, as long as flow is pretty good. But when viewing it within this parameter of the first 50 pages, this new last chapter helps set up some other parts of the book that the other chapter did not. And it also introduces some more world building in dialogue. So it's not info dumpy or anything, and it definitely doesn't slow down or shift the pace like the other chapter did. So it would be interesting now, and I know that I'm in draft 6 and I want to keep going with draft 6, but it would be interesting now to read where this chapter sits and then to continue reading from where these 50 pages ends through the rest of draft 6 and see if there are any other areas where I need to switch chapters around for better flow and consistency. But I do think that this was the right choice. However, now that means that we get to just start over from the beginning and just keep working on these yellow highlighted portions, make sure that everything's reading really smoothly, and just keep plowing through these first 50 pages to make sure that they are as sharp as they can possibly be right now. I'm out picking up dinner for my family, but before I left, it was raining. Now we have blue skies. Don't know what happened there. But I was hanging out and trying to figure out what to name 2 things within these first 50 pages that I have put off, again, for years of naming. And I was hoping to name these things. One of them is a character and one of them is like a kingdom name. I was hoping to name these things in draft 6 and I haven't yet. So as a part of this exercise of doing my first 50 pages, I am going to be forcing myself to name this character and this place. And so I pulled together 2 lists, one for the character name and one for the place. And now I'm gonna
sit and think about some of the names and see which names like go together, because I think that's a little important for this character. And then again, when I get a little bit further with these 50 pages, I also want to take a look at my query letter just to kind of see what my agent package is going to be looking like. I know I'm wearing the same outfit. This is my comfy like writing clothes, but flying back from my trip, I had 2 flights, which was great for writing time. I have pretty much narrowed down the name that I needed to choose to 3 options. And then I have a couple choices for the place name picked out. And I kind of want to send that to a couple of my friends and kind of get like a gut check from them on it. And then when I was on the plane, I was working through some of the yellow highlighted portions. And basically what I was discovering is that there is at least 2 other characters that also still need to be named. I'm also not really sure why, but I started at the bottom of the document when I was looking at the highlighted portions and working through the highlighted portions going up through the document. And I was able to clear up a pretty good number of them, but I'm going to be working on that more this evening. I still absolutely adore my writing group. I've not been able to go in a couple of weeks, but I ended up working on editing for an hour and a half straight. I feel like I was able to make some crazy good progress on the yellow highlighted portions. And then I started my second read through of this first 50-page portion, and I only got into about the first chapter before my eyes started like giving up on me. My eyes just basically started screaming at me, and like I had to look up and my eyes wouldn't focus on the wall. And I was like, okay, this is good. I've been staring at my computer for too long, which is, you know, a friendly reminder to stretch your eyes occasionally, because an hour and a half of staring at a computer screen is not a good idea. It's been a little while since I talked to you guys. This editing exercise was not supposed to take this long, and I really didn't want it cutting into my true finishing draft 6 time, and yet here we are. So I'm currently on my way to my writing group, and I chose to do this tonight over a concert because I really want to finish my 50 pages. I think it's a great exercise. I would like to finish this exercise and then move back into finishing draft 6. But I was just finishing up reading over this first chapter again, and it is amazing how many times I have gone through this chapter and thought it was really good by the end of that pass. And yet, again, as I was finishing this pass, I was finding more things. And sometimes I have to read a paragraph or read a couple of lines and then reread them until I can figure out what's bothering me about it. And so for this instance, it was because 2 sentences about 3 lines apart ended with the same 3 words. And I don't know how I haven't caught that before. And there was another instance a little further up that was bothering me, and I had to reread it until I could figure out why. And it was because in one sentence I said that she's running, and then to basically what I thought I was doing was giving more description, I used the phrase picking her way across the snowy field. And picking her way across is not the same as running. So then I just had to delete the picking her way, and then it reads so much more smoothly because the audience, or the reader theoretically, views her as running and not running and then slowing it down to picking her way across. And it's just fascinating that these are not things that I have picked up on before. I've also seen a couple of instances of passive voice, and I don't know how passive voice not only got to the 6th draft, but I know that this is not the 6th time that I've looked over this chapter. I know that I've looked over this chapter probably at least 20 times, and I don't know how these things are still getting by me. Just got more feedback that the forest needs a name, which is very fair, but it's one more thing I have to name. So now I think I'm up to 5 more names. It has been an entire week since I last talked to you guys, and tonight is once again my writing group, and so I'm really gonna try and get through this block. I was really trying to go easy on myself. I was in Yellowstone. I tried to take the weekend off, but now it's Monday again. I have writing group again tonight. I'm really gonna try to sit down, and first thing that I'm gonna do is try and name these characters so that I can move past this block and just finish these sample pages. I did not end up naming any characters yet tonight, but I made very long lists for several of the characters' names. I just did a lot of brainstorming. I talked to my writing group people about it, and now I have lists, which will be helpful. And then I spent the rest of my writing group working on the query letter. So I was actually getting something done in this experiment of the sample pages in the query letter. And let me just say, I am so happy that I tried to do a query letter like 3 years ago. I don't remember what draft I was on. Honestly, could have been like draft 2 or 3, and I just wanted to get like a query letter draft out there. I was so grateful that I had something written down. Yes, I probably scrapped and rewrote like half of it, but I was so happy to have a starting point. But we are making headway. I feel like I started filming this video so long ago, and I would really really like to wrap this up. This experiment was not supposed to take this long.
I procrastinated for so long without realizing that I was procrastinating, and I don't know if it was because I was feeling some kind of resistance with naming characters or like what was going on, but I was resisting. But now, thankfully, it's 10:22 p.m., but I am at 6 lists of names out of 7, and the 7th one doesn't technically need a name. Shoot, there might be 8. Oh my gosh, this won't ever end.
This process of naming characters is never going to end because this is just naming a couple of the characters that are mentioned within like the first 50 pages. Why won't this stop? Okay, I do think that this other character that I forgot about probably needs, no, they both need names. Oh my gosh, I'm so over this. And I forgot that one of my bullet list items is actually a set of twins, so it's 9, not 8, and not 7. Great. It's actually 10. I forgot that I wanted to rename a side character. So not only do I have so many other names that I still need to figure out, which by the way, I did just like do a very simple Google search and I liked the first name that came up for one of the names. So at least that's taken care of. But now I'm at 10 needed names for all of my naming processes that I'm doing right now. I'm ready to be done with this. All right, now I'm just doing extra credit because after I tried renaming that character's potential new names don't go with the other character whose POV she shows up in's name. So if I want to rename that side character to one of these new names, then I have to rename the main POV character to fit with the side character's name better. So I'm just doing extra credit. I'm just renaming the entire cast of characters in this book because I apparently have nothing else better to do. So on my list, I had now 11. I don't know how this list keeps getting longer, but I had 11 people and places that I wanted to name or rename. And then I actually just realized that I wanted to rename a 12th character's name. Not completely change it, but I think that the spelling is kind of misleading with the pronunciation. So I want to rephrase or rework that name. Whatever, I want to respell it. And I figured that one out. So now I'm at 11 out of 12 names done and pretty much chosen. If not chosen, then I have lists for them. However, the 12th name is a name for the baker, and I think I might just give myself the pass and just call him that right now. It's not a crazy important character. It is very much a side character. I might be able to get away with just calling him the baker. So now that I have most of these names, I think I just need to start going through and swapping them out for what they are replacing. And if I can't decide on some of them, like naming a forest, I should probably draw out of a bowl. So I did get all the names figured out prior to writing group, but I didn't get to swap out the names until I got to writing group. But I did get all of the names figured out except for that elusive 12th one, which is fine, and I'm okay with not figuring that one out right this second because I named 11 other people and places, or renamed, you know, for some of them. But I got a lot of naming and renaming done. And then at writing group, I got those names subbed in for the placeholders previous to that. And it feels like such a relief for these characters to have names because that is something that just felt like it kept like blocking me, was these people not having names, and therefore it was like hard to fully picture when I was going through edits and everything because it didn't feel complete. But I'm really excited to get back to editing now that I have these people named because I do think that it's going to feel more whole. This process is taking me so much longer than I thought it would. Again, I just wanted it to be like an interesting, fun kind of writing experiment where I could figure out what it would be like for somebody to just have a taste of DE. And here we are, weeks after I started trying to do this. But I was able to name/rename 11 out of 12 people and places. And then I got those names swapped out in these 50 pages of sample pages in the query letter. So now that's all good to go. And now I just get to read over it again, polish it up, and then move on to the rest of draft 6. For this final reread, I did change all markup to simple markup, and it has been a lot easier to read through, and I'm noticing that I'm making more changes, or still making changes, depending on how you want to look at it. But it has been very helpful to not see the changes that I've already made. It's now 2:40 in the morning. I have been working on this for a while this evening. I did just get to page 47 because in this pass, I have cut out 3 pages from my total 50 pages that I'm working on, which means that I need to add a couple pages from the next chapter that I'm now going to look over. Just to round out my 50 pages from 47 to 50 so that it feels more complete in this writing experiment that I'm working on. That is the 50 pages and my query letter edited to the point of me being comfortable with somebody else reading those. That's crazy. Oh my goodness. And of course it's like 3 in the morning. It is 3:03 a.m. on November 1st. Wow. I honestly love where the 50 pages cuts off. Obviously as it stands right now, but I really like where this ends. I really think that approaching my sample pages in this way, basically just as a taster for what somebody else reading my book for the first time or submitting to an agent who would be reading this for the first time and just getting this glimpse of my query letter in my first 50-ish sample pages. I really think that it's very accurate to the rest of the story. I really like the way that the first 50 pages sets up the rest of the story. I want to send this to people. Like, I want to send this to all my friends because I've sent my first chapter to a couple of people. They've really enjoyed it. They've asked me for more, and now I feel really confident with the first 50 pages. So I might have to send this out to a few people and just kind of get some perspectives and stuff. This writing experiment took me a lot longer than I was anticipating, but I was very stuck on a couple of items, primarily naming characters. Things were just not flowing. It is amazing. I know I already said this, but it is so incredible how much easier and how much better the story reads now that people and places have names. Crazy concept, I know. For those of you that can name characters like right off the jump, I am impressed by you. I was on draft 6 and people still didn't have names, but wow, it reads like a real book. Yay! Oh my gosh. This is so cool. There's something about this that's making it feel real. And I got so excited working on this tonight because at least these first 50 pages feels like a real book. Feels like a real book. Feels like this is a book that I could be reading. I was still making a lot of changes. That's not a surprise. Draft 6 has been a lot of freezing changes, and working on these first 50 pages was no different. But wow, I am so happy with how this went. Not stoked about how long it took, but happy with how it went, or how it at least ended up going. As far as revisions go, I did end up with 1,077 revisions in the first 50 pages. This process took so much longer than I was expecting. It took me about 2 months, and a lot of that was just being stuck on naming people. However, actually forcing myself to sit down and trying to view DE from like new eyes was such an incredibly helpful process. I got a bunch of people named. That is going to help the rest of the story. As soon as people got named, these 50 pages were reading like a book, and that I feel like is what has been blocking me for so long, and now I don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm sure there's going to be a couple more people that need to be named throughout the story, but naming like 11 people and places within the first 50 pages is going to dramatically decrease the number of people later on that need names. It was really, really cool doing this because DE is feeling like a book. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm Sara Lubratt, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Thank you.